Hello. You probably recognize two of these three people. This is Martin Luther King Jr., and this is Gandhi. The two were champions of nonviolent protest movements and are basically celebrities in history. However, who is this? Few could put a name to the man in this photo, despite the fact that he was a vital leader of the civil rights movement who worked and organized tirelessly behind the scenes. He was a man whose competence was unmistakable and whose contribution was profuse. His name was Bayard Rustin, and his life was nothing short of epic. And no, we're not exaggerating. Here's why. Rustin was born in the fine year of 1912 in Westchester, Pennsylvania. Interestingly, he was actually raised by his maternal grandparents, and his grandmother was a Quaker, so he was exposed to pacifist views extremely early in his life. When he was a teenager, he realized that he was gay, something that would influence the legacy of his activism later on. As a young adult, he attended Wilberforce University and, get this, was expelled for organizing a strike on the school. That is some great foreshadowing if I've ever seen any. Rustin bounced around at a couple more colleges and then moved to Harlem, New York, where he became involved in a Quaker organization whose official name was the Religious Society of Friends. He also became briefly involved with the Young Communist League. A quick side note, during this time, communists in the civil rights movement were inspired by Stalin's theories of nationalism to advocate for a separate African American nation in the Southeast. What? Rustin soon became disillusioned with these ideas and left the League. However, his association with the Socialist Party got him connected with the civil rights leader A. Philip Randolph, marking the start of his involvement in real activism. With Randolph, he worked with a civil rights organization known as the Fellowship of Reconciliation, or FOR. After doing that for a while, Rustin decides to do something which we soon learn is one of his favorite pastimes, traveling to random places to provide humanitarian aid or learn about protest movements. He straight up leaves New York, flies across the country, and posts up in California to help Japanese Americans who've been put in internment camps. Pretty epic. Fast forward to one day in 1942. Rustin gets on a segregated bus in Nashville, and when the driver tells him to move to the back, he says no and gets arrested. Keep in mind that this is happening a whopping 13 years before Rosa Parks did the same thing. Anyways, Rustin is a certified civil rights activist now, and helps to create the famous Congress of Racial Equality, or CORE. In fact, he's nicknamed the Uncle of CORE. Having done this already guarantees Rustin a spot on the Wikipedia page for the civil rights movement. But he doesn't stop there. He and a guy named George Hauser decide to organize the Journey of Reconciliation, the first of what will become known as the celebrated Freedom Rides throughout the South. Then, surprise, Rustin dips from the United States and straight up travels to India to learn from the movements of Gandhi himself on the ways of civil disobedience. Now that's epic. And since he's nearby, he checks in on some of the African independence movements to learn a thing or two from them as well. When he comes back from his vacation, Rustin anonymously helps write a book which will go on to become one of the most famous pacifist works in history. And now that he has insane amounts of Gandhi-inspired expertise in nonviolent protest, he becomes an advisor to none other than Martin Luther King Jr. himself. Ever heard of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference? Well, alongside Dr. King, Rustin was the other founder of the massively influential organization. Oh, and ever heard of the March on Washington? Rustin was the chief organizer of the march, drilling officers, directing traffic, scheduling podium speakers, you name it. Rustin took care of it. And as if that wasn't enough, the very next year, Rustin single-handedly coordinated the New York City school boycott, which 400,000 people participated in, compared to the 250,000 of the March on Washington. The boycott has been called the largest civil rights demonstration in American history. Later in his life, Rustin continued to work with politicians and the black community for civil rights, labor movements, gay rights, and numerous other causes. At the age when most people would have been retired and relaxing on a lawn chair somewhere, Rustin was ballin' it out with humanitarian organizations in places like Vietnam and Cambodia. In fact, he died in 1987 while on a mission in Haiti. Oh, and this entire time, Rustin was a professional singer. That was not a joke. The man actually recorded an LP and several singles. At this point, you may be asking yourself, why? Why haven't I heard of a man whose life was so unquestionably epic? Well, the sad truth is that during the civil rights movement, politicians and organizers could not afford the liability of publicizing Rustin's contributions due to his homosexuality and early affiliations with the Communist Party. Because of this, he was left to work behind the scenes, and never at the forefront of the very operations he orchestrated. But we haven't forgotten about him. In 2013, Barack Obama posthumously gave Bayard Rustin a Presidential Medal of Freedom, and Rustin is legendarily the only person in the world to be simultaneously on the LGBTQ Wall of Honor and the U.S. Department of Labor's Hall of Honor. Bayard Rustin was an amazing man, a man whose remarkable courage, undying commitment, and prolific contribution have made a profound mark in the annals of history. A man who, despite being wrongfully occluded from the Mount Rushmore of the civil rights movement, will now find a spot in the Mount Rushmore of our hearts, where he will inspire and fuel us for generations to come.